Hello, this is the Religious Studies Project. My name's David Robertson.
And my name is Christopher Carter. Attentive listeners will have noticed that last week's interview was not Paulina Kalata speaking with Levi McLaughlin as we promised. That's because it's this week.
Yeah.
we messed up.
We got so far ahead in recording our intros that we managed to somehow skip a week.
I think it was my fault.
It doesn't matter.
I assured you that we had definitely recorded that one.
It's all good. All it means is that you don't have to listen to me interviewing for 2 weeks in a row. You get to listen to Paulina Kalata speaking to Levi McLaughlin instead on the subject of Soka Gakkai, Kōmeitō, and the religious voices of Japan's political arena.
Take it away, guys.
Throughout Japanese history, religion has always colored and influenced the matters of the state. Religious validation of imperialist aggression and Japan's war efforts in the first half of the 20th century are just but one example of this. Japanese religious institutions entered post-war period with the ethically problematic baggage of war. But promulgation of Japan's post-war constitution that introduced a legal separation of religion and the state, the militarization of Japan, and freedom of religion opened a new chapter of a supposedly pacifist and secular political system. Religion became a private matter of an individual. And yet, we are still talking about religion and politics in Japan. We are joined today by Levi McLaughlin, who is an associate professor at the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at North Carolina State University. He is a co-author and co-editor of Kōmeitō, Politics and Religion in Japan, and has just completed a book entitled Soka Gakkai's Human Revolution, The Rise of Mimetic Nation. It only seemed appropriate to invite him to talk to us about religion and politics in Japan. And his book is actually forthcoming from the University of Hawaii Press late 2018. So congratulations on that, Levi.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Religious Studies Project. So we are here at the University of Manchester ahead of your talk later on this afternoon, and where you will be talking about the Soka Gakkai, which is one of Japan's largest lay Buddhist organizations, and also is often referred to as one of the most engaged or politically engaged and influential, I dare say, new religions in Japan today. So why do you think we should continue talking about religion and politics in the country that has constitutional division of religion and state and kind of...
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me. There are other questions we also have to think about as well. For example, why are we talking about religion in a country where in surveys that are given up to ask about religious commitment, the wording of the survey usually is something along the lines of, do you have religious faith? And the majority of respondents in Japan will say no. 70% or plus will say, I don't have religious faith. And also, the recent elections at the national level, just over 50% of the population actually takes the efforts to go out and vote. Why talk about religion and politics in these conditions? Perhaps would be another thing to add to that conundrum. The reason is that there are these organizations that are unmatched in their capacity to mobilize votes. Though they are minority players in the religion and politics fields, they still nonetheless move the needle on policy and may actually be the crucial elements in forthcoming upheavals in regards to Japan's constitution and its place in the geopolitical order. So let me speak a little more specifically. I'm talking about an organization called Soka Gakkai. Translates literally as the Value Creation Study Association.
What a great name.
Isn't it? Does it sound like a religion?
Not quite.
Right. Well, that's because it didn't begin as a religion. It began as an educational reform organization in the 1930s, whose founders then switched into following a specific form of medieval Japanese Buddhism, following a reformer named Nichiren from the 13th century, who held that only exclusive faith in a teaching known as the Lotus Sutra, which is understood to be the Buddha's final teaching, will allow for salvation, and all other forms of teachings, including other Buddhist teachings, are to be done away with. And so the organization they ended up creating was a staunch defender of this particular form of Buddhism, which ran afoul of wartime religious regulations. The founders, Makiguchi Tsunesaburo and his disciple Tora Jose, were imprisoned. Makiguchi died of malnutrition during the war. One amongst very, very few people who were actually willing to confront and reject the authority of the wartime state.
And oppose the...
That's right. And opposed it for religious reasons. And so after the end of the Second World War, Soka Gakkai reformulates and grows from a few thousand members to millions of members between the beginning of the 1950s up to the end of the 1960s. Today, they claim an absolutely staggering number of followers in Japan, 8.27 million households, which is hugely exaggerated. The reality, though, is something like 3% of Japan self-identifies as belonging to Soka Gakkai. And that doesn't sound like a lot necessarily, right? But if you have 3% of the population, it means 3 out of 100 people that you know are related to you. They are people you work with, or maybe you are one of these 3%. So one of the reasons that Soka Gakkai has both grown so big and so prominent, and also terribly notorious within Japanese society, is its the fact that electioneering on behalf of Soka Gakkai's affiliated political party is a component of Soka Gakkai faith practices. So members chant the Lotus Sutra. They solicit membership. They're very well known for being proselytizers, for missionizing. And they're also, every election, be it the smallest town council up to Japan's national diet, the parliament, people in Japan will know they're going to get a phone call. They're going to get the knock on the door from their friends who are members of Soka Gakkai to ask them to vote for Kōmeitō, or to vote for Kōmeitō's political ally, which is the Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, which is Japan's largest party. So Japan right now is run by a coalition government, which is the LDP and Kōmeitō. So Kōmeitō has a seat at the table, and they may be a comparatively small organization, but they wield a disproportionately large amount of power, both politically and religiously.
Sorry to interrupt the episode, but we just wanted to let you know, to remind you about our Patreon link. The Religious Studies Project has always been free since its inception, but we know that there's a great problem in academia with people not being paid for the work that they're expected to do, particularly early career scholars. And we at the RSP want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So you can help if you can spare even £1 a month by going to patreon.com/projectrs and subscribing. We know that these podcasts are very useful for people who are teaching and people in their learning. So if you can help either by subscribing there or by making a one-off donation using the PayPal button on our website, it would be greatly appreciated and will help us keep bringing you this podcast for free and fight against exploitation in academia. But now, back to the episode.
So who are Kōmeitō and what are their policies?
That's a really good question, and it's also a tough question. They are difficult to pigeonhole politically because they don't fall neatly into a right or left kind of distribution. Historically, they would have to be called extremely left-wing because they were supporters of pacifism, and they have always been their central platforms have always been focused on social welfare. They appeal to their primary constituency. Their primary constituency is homemakers, women in Japan, who make up the bedrock of Soka Gakkai and are the most active in terms of electioneering. And so it's things like reducing taxation on household goods, promoting education, clean water, the environment, things of that nature. Support for children, families with small children, low-income households, you name it. But recently, they've also been supportive of LDP moves to move toward greater freedom for Japan's military. Japan does not actually officially have what you might call regular armed forces. They maintain what are called the Japan Self-Defense Forces. They are hindered from militarizing by a clause in the Constitution, notorious clause called Article 9, which prevents Japan from maintaining war materials or using war as a means of resolving international disputes. But in 2015, a series of new laws were passed through the Diet with Kōmeitō's support that radically reinterpreted Article 9 to allow for what's called collective self-defense, which will allow Japan to go to the aid of its military allies, that is to say the United States, and to enter into armed conflict. So we have now this strange policy kind of platform, this odd connection between what are considered to be fairly hawkish right-wing approaches on a defense front, and really progressive social welfare-oriented policies as well.
That's really interesting because it would mix the Tories with the Corbynists in UK context.
Potentially, yes. And actually, historically, Kōmeitō's greatest rivals were the Japan Communist Party.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. So you talked about the 2015 changes in the law, but what about the most recent elections of 2017, and kind of what was the role of Kōmeitō in that?
So there was a snap election called by Prime Minister Abe Shinzo in October of 2017, which was treated by a lot of people as a rather cynical move on the part of the LDP and its coalition allies to secure power and to basically ensure that Prime Minister Abe remains in power, and to take advantage of an opposition that is pretty big disarray right now at the national level in Japan. Overall, the government gained seats. The LDP gained seats. The only component of that was that Kōmeitō lost seats in the lower house. It went from 34 to 29 seats. Why is that? Yeah. And so some of the questions that they're difficult to say definitively, but I've recently, with the help of my colleague Axel Klein, who's a professor of political science at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany, who is an amazing scholar who can compile all kinds of great elections data. We worked together to look at Gakkai member attitudes in combination with this quantitative aspect of it, and determined that basically the lesson we have to learn here, that Soka Gakkai is not one unified bloc. And that is translating into an increasingly disaggregated voting situation. And so it had the lowest number of votes at the national level for an election like this since it joined the LDP and coalition in 1999. Under 7 million, and 7 million is treated as something of a magic number, and that there's a psychological aspect to going below that, and losing all these seats, including one veteran politician in particular who was kind of pushed out. What is going on? Well, there are several constituencies we can now identify within Soka Gakkai. These are developing as a result of Kōmeitō's policy shifts away from decades of supporting a pacifist attitude and defending Article 9 toward being totally on board with collective self-defense. What you're starting to see are generational shifts, gender divisions, and a kind of a move toward concerns about what's going to happen to Soka Gakkai in light of one very important thing. Because right now, Soka Gakkai is headed by an honorary president named Ikeda Daisaku, who is revered as an absolute authority within the organization. He has not appeared to address a Gakkai meeting since May of 2010. He just turned 90 years old. And so necessarily the organization is looking to a future after Ikeda Daisaku's lifetime. And there are members within the group, particularly second, third, fourth generation Soka Gakkai members who are younger, who are starting to question why their practice must include unquestioning loyalty to a political party that has absolutely reversed what they consider to be Ikeda Saitaku's teachings on peace.
So that's becoming quite challenging in that sense. But the usual association is, how did Kōmeitō emerge originally? Okay. And how does it now refer? Okay. How does it refer towards the Soka Gakkai? Does it define itself as a Buddhist party, or?
Right. Well, this is one of the conundra, one of the difficult things that people who are interested in politics have to deal with. And one of the reasons I love talking about this is because Kōmeitō forces political scientists to actually take religion seriously. Kōmeitō was founded for religious reasons. It was founded very specifically for Nichiren Buddhist reasons. And this makes a lot of politics people uncomfortable. They like to think that there should be, as you mentioned earlier, a division between religion and government. And especially in Japan, where the 1947 Constitution guarantees that there will be a clear split between religion and government. In 1964, Kōmeitō was founded, and there had been previously, Soka Gakkai started running candidates for office from 1954, and in 1955 they started being elected. From the outset, Soka Gakkai entered politics in order to bring about a specific vision of constructing a temple complex that would mark the conversion of the populace of Japan to complete reverence, sole exclusive reverence for the Lotus Sutra. And what this really meant, of course, was they would convert to Soka Gakkai. And it was something it comes from the Nichiren teachings after his lifetime, comes to be known as the three great secret dharmas. They consist of the title of the lotus, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The second one is the calligraphic mandala that he inscribed in 1279 for the salvation of Japan. And the third one was supposed to be this, what was called an ordination platform, kaidan in Japanese, that was understood for centuries to be this kind of far-flung, distant vision, only to be achieved upon this majestic goal being realized. Mm-hmm. When Soka Gakkai started to grow from a few thousand to millions of followers, that distant goal started to become something of a concrete objective. And so one of the components of realizing this kaidan, this ordination platform, this temple complex, is that it had to be promulgated by the government. And so during Nichiren's time, of course, that meant something quite different. But by the time you reach the 20th century, that means Japan's parliament. And so how do you do that? You have to actually have a place in Japan's parliament. And so this actually was the motivation for Soka Gakkai entering politics. 1964, Kōmeitō was founded as a party and included a lot of different platforms, actually, mostly focused on very utopian ideals of world peace and social welfare. And this at the time, there was this concept of Buddhist democracy as well that was not clearly defined, but was very idealistic. But it was a religious objective. In 1969, there were a series of scandals that erupted as a result of basically Kōmeitō politicians attempting to intervene to forestall the publication of one book in particular that was seen as extremely negative about Soka Gakkai, and that precipitated an official division between Kōmeitō and its founding religion, Soka Gakkai. And since 1970, the two have maintained an official split. Of course, members of Soka Gakkai still campaign on behalf of Kōmeitō, and there's it's unclear actually about some of the other aspects that bind the two organizations together. Nonetheless, what you have seen though is Kōmeitō become what you have to call an ordinary political party. Mm-hmm. That is to say, it does not focus on this eschatological religious goal anymore. Mm-hmm. It focuses on really concrete political objectives. And one of the things you can prove about it no longer actually focusing on that, it's been in government since 1999, and there's been no evidence whatsoever that they are trying to get any sort of favor on religious grounds for its founding religion or any religion.
So they should be treated seriously.
They absolutely should be treated seriously, and also treated as another political party, which because of the specific history and because of their connection to a religion that has gained a reputation for being an aggressive proselytizer. They are often saddled with a stigma of not being a religion, not being a serious political party, but instead being sort of an arm of a religious organization. Whereas in every analysis, they look much more just like another party.
Which kind of throws an interesting element to the mix of Japanese politics at the moment.
That's right. Well, there are other aspects to think about as well, especially in light of the fact that it's been a supporter for the LDP. It's not just Kōmeitō politicians, but Liberal Democratic Party politicians that rely upon Soka Gakkai voters to be elected.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Levi. I'm afraid that this is all we have time for, but it has been a real pleasure talking to you. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge.
Thanks so much, Paula.
Thank you.
Wonderful to hear from Paula again there. It's been a while since we've had you on the podcast. So
Paula?
hopefully, yeah, it's Paulina, is her full name.
Yeah,
but
diminutive.
Paula, it's
cool.
So
We're like a family here, the Religious Studies Project, in many ways.
We are indeed. So it'll be wonderful to have you back for a few more, hopefully. And great to have another interview focusing on Japan. On that note, we've currently got a call out for interviewers, particularly focusing on Asia, Africa, and actually North America, where our representation has somewhat dwindled in recent years.
Yeah,
people have
either got promoted or they've moved to Europe.
over here. So do check that out on the website, and if you are in a position yourself or know anyone who might be, or just know any topics that we should be covering or scholars we should be looking at, do get in touch.
Yeah, don't feel put off now that we've got some level of establishment and respect. We're always looking for new people to join on, and this whole project runs on people taking part. So please do get in touch.
David and I are just about to go off and have our annual planning meeting. I've just emailed the trustees of the charity as well to try and set up our annual general meeting for a few weeks from now.
Excellent.
So it's all go.
Yeah, we'll be strategizing and planning for next year. We're in the last few weeks now. What is there? Another 2 after this?
Exactly. Yeah. So next week it is actually David speaking with Boaz Huss on that nebulous term.
And Steve Sutcliffe.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, Steve. Wouldn't want to forget Steve. It's a very bad move, really. On that nebulous term, spirituality.
Indeed. I think I talked about this a bit in the previous week's intro, so
jump back to that one.
Yeah. No, if you're even vaguely interested in ideas, new religions, spirituality, especially in the sort of New Age milieu, but also critical theories of religion and secularization and these kind of non-religion-y kind of ideas, I think you're going to find quite a lot in this discussion that's interesting. So do come back.
And thanks for listening.
The Religious Studies Project is sponsored by the British Association for the Study of Religions, the North American Association for the Study of Religion, and the International Association for the History of Religions.
Brought to you by founders and editors-in-chief Chris Cotter and David Robertson, and managing editor Thomas J. Coleman III. Our features are edited by Jonathan Tuckett, and our Opportunities Digest by Jana Shirley. Podcast transcription by Helen Bradstock, with audio assistance from Gregory Schneider and Samuel Ward. Social media managed by Ray Radford, and sales and marketing by Sammy Bishop.
Don't forget, you can support the project using our amazon.com, .co.uk and .ca links, or by donating at patreon.com/projectrs. And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, iTunes, and other portals.